Hello and welcome to another Hubnut video. This one's a bit different. It's just chatting on the sofa. And before we get to the main topic, Bangernomics, I would like to just say thank you to the chap who very kindly sent these sockets. Magnetic spark plug sockets. That should be a bit of a game changer. No more fighting with bits of rubber falling out of your socket. So I look forward to testing those. Thank you very much. Yeah, and also, obviously, merchandise. We have the Power Less is More t-shirts back in stock. There we go. Ta-da! At long last. So if you would like one of those, head to the store. Hoodies available also. That didn't sound healthy. But yeah, I want to jump into the main topic of Bangernomics because it feels to me like Bangernomics is becoming a bit of a struggle.
Okay, I appreciate people are going to join this video because they are Bangernomics fan or knowledgeable of this topic.
Kind of what we're about.
Do you want to do a little sort of insight into what it is for those?
That's a very good idea. That is exactly why you're here. We need good ideas. Bangernomics is, well, I've never been a true proponent of it. In theory, you buy a cheap car, you run it until it's ruined, and you buy another cheap car. And it's an approach quite a lot of people use. Some people are a bit more like myself. I tend to throw money at my bangers and try and keep them going as long as possible, really. So we bought a 700 quid Berlingo and then spent £2,000 on suspension, that sort of thing. And
£190 charade.
Yeah, the 100. Yeah, we won't even talk about £190 charade, but I will in a minute actually because it's relevant. Yeah, it seems to be getting more difficult. I had a quick scan on Gumtree this morning. Gumtree used to be my favourite hunting ground. If you searched cars under £1,000, it was awash with cheap old cars. You know, sort of like around 20 years old, that, you know, often had full service history, were often really nice condition, often very few owners. That sea seems to have vanished. And I wanted to have a bit of a think about why that is. And one reason, which is relevant to the charade, is rising scrap values. Just to wind you up, really, I went to cartakeback.com, I think it is, a website where you say, I want to scrap this car, what will you give me? And was instantly offered 200 quid for our £190 charade.
Particularly cantankerous mood that day.
Probably.
Quite possibly.
We've had some wars, me and that car, which we'll discuss in a future video. But yeah, that's the reality. The car we bought for 190 quid is worth more as scrap. And generally any sort of family car, Ford Focus, Mondeo, that sort of size, is probably 300 quid's worth of scrap value sitting right there.
However, with the difficulty of there not being the cars within that price bracket on the market, there is a lot of more, to use the old cliche phrase, mend and make do, isn't there?
Yeah.
Because you're not going to get... Historically, you could have bought a £300 car, you ran it till the MOT, it failed miserably, or you didn't even put it in, you scrapped it, and then you got your next £300 car, but they're not there. And you can't leave yourself without a vehicle. So there is a lot more mend and make do, which is probably a positive thing. Yeah,
I think there's two things, especially here in Wales. Public transport is so woeful and bus services are getting cut back all the time. But if you want a job, you're probably going to have to travel and you can't rely on public transport. There are no trains here at all. There's just buses that don't even run at all on a Sunday. It's not too bad otherwise, every few hours. But out in the hills, there are quite a few services getting binned off. And people are like, well, what do? We've got no alternative. You're forced into car ownership, which means there is growing demand for cheap cars because, you know, not everyone can afford an expensive car. Not everyone can afford brand new and to commit to monthly payments.
No.
But I think one of the problems...
That's a huge discussion on Twitter
on Twitter just at this very moment. Weird Car Twitter is a lovely place, but very much talking about new car versus old car. But yeah, I think one of the problems is we generally got fewer cars because they're 20 years old. So quite a lot of them have been scrapped anyway. I still think the average life for a car is probably not much beyond 10 years. Certainly when we go to Tannagroys, we are stunned at the age of the cars coming in. Like, these have no age at all. And I think one problem for that is the expense of repairs. You think our Berlingo, we've spent £2,000 on suspension, gave it a timing belt kit, but the 1.6 HDI, which came afterwards, is more complex, more prone to blowing turbos and injectors and all sorts.
Inaccessibility to newer cars. isn't there? I mean, you can see that in the difference between swapping over Ellie's engine, that took us a day, really.
Not even a day, yeah.
And then trying to do chemis and dealing with...
Yeah.
I mean, what is it? On the throttle body, there's 2 sensors, which could both go wrong, as well as anything else that could go wrong. So it's...
And it's utterly horrible to work on.
So, yeah, the newer ones, they're not... they're not coming onto the market because they're profoundly dead.
Yeah, I think that is okay. People are hammering cars into the ground a bit, but there is so much more to go wrong. Dual mass flywheels, more complex injection systems. You got CAN bus wiring and just sensors all over the place, any of which can ping up an error, and suddenly your car's in limp home mode. And I think there is a problem with deciphering what is wrong with these vehicles as well, which makes the repair of them somewhat dubious. So... yeah, I think a lot of cars are being scrapped that fundamentally look absolutely fine. Our favourite Renault Valsatis that we see every time we go to Tanagrois, it's still there, folks. And I bet that's in for something trivial, just some electrical gremlin.
Yeah.
And local garages just gone, well, we don't know what it is. We don't understand. We can't find it.
Well, there's not enough of them to know, is there?
No.
There's not enough of them for somebody to go,
No, why would you be a Valsatis
I'm the Valsatis
specialist?
expert.
Yeah. Maybe in France there are Valsatis experts. Let us know in the comments.
Wasn't there somebody with a collection of 6 or 7?
That was Avon Times.
I was Avon Times, not
Yeah, and I think they've been all for sale, but much the same. Similarly complex in many ways. So yeah, there's definitely a problem where the cars are harder to repair on the DIY side of things. You know, there's some cars you need a computer to change brake pads, which is utterly ridiculous. You can't push the caliper back in unless you tell the computer you're doing so. So that's definitely having a bit of an impact. You've got this increased demand, and then you've got the fact that scrap values are higher. So if you've got a car that's worth 300 or 400 quid, would you actually want to go to the trouble of selling it? Because selling cheap cars, well, I mean, selling any cars is terrible, but cheap cars especially.
Another thing.
You're opening yourself to Facebook Marketplace messers, eBay time wasters. It's just a world of frustration. And people who want perfection for their 400 quid. It's a lot easier to just go, hello scrapyard, will you take my car? They say yes. Car gone, money in hand. Technically you're not allowed to do that. It would be cash into your bank account, but the principle stands. It's minimal hassle. I mean, the Altzit we sadly had to send to Tanagrois, and they just came and got it, and then the money was transferred to my account, and happy days.
I think that ULEZ is an interesting concept on this, because you would have thought it would flood the market with cheap cars, but it's not. They're just gone, aren't they?
I don't think they're gone yet. I'm seeing a lot. I'm seeing a lot of adverts. It must be said, when I was doing my Gumtree search, I did it within 100 miles of home, and that doesn't include London. So it's a good point. If I did that search in London,
that'd be interesting to see the difference.
Might find more for a short time before ULEZ kicks in.
Yeah, because I mean, for me personally, talking about the scrapping situation, if I had a car that was under threat and they were going to charge me money every single day, that's something that would weigh on my mind massively. And I would just, even if I loved that car, you're in London, so you've got a certain reassurance of a transport network, I would scrap it.
Yeah.
And I hate to say
especially as there will be incentives for you to scrap the car. So obviously if you sold that car privately to someone who wants to save cars that are around 20 years old, and there's plenty of us, you don't get that incentive. So if you were giving up motoring, it works. But if you just want a car still, you will go and scrap it and claim your allowance for your new car, or
I think
train fares I think you get as well.
It would be interesting to have a look at London as a comparative, because we're talking about here and it's very thin on the ground here.
Yeah. London is still full of older cars, but not for much longer.
No.
ULEZ kicks in August, I think.
No, but I mean, it's there is a whole cost of living part to this, isn't there? People are mending and making do, and particularly, we don't live in a particularly wealthy area.
No,
so
that's another factor.
People are holding on to cars and fixing them.
Yeah, I mean, that would be my general advice as well, is the time of just going, that was fun, now we'll buy something else, which has kind of been what the channel has built up on. I sadly think those days are over. It is more like what we've had to do with Duolingo, where you find an example you're happy with and you throw money at it.
Yeah.
So we've done rust proofing, suspension overhaul, cam belt change. Yeah. We're doing our best to prolong that car's future, but it's very unlikely we're going to just go, okay, we'll get rid of that and we'll acquire something else.
No, and you're acute. Whereas I think historically people would put a lot of money into a car, but write it off almost in their head. So they'd write it off. They'd be like, oh, well, I've put a £1.50 into this car, but I'm going to sell it for 500 because I just need to get rid of it. People aren't doing that anymore. People are acutely aware of the money they've put into a car.
Yeah, and I suspect there's also, like I talked about Blingo, they've got ever more complex as they've gone on. I'm not ready to own a B9 Berlingo, which is the next one, because there's just more stuff to go wrong. And that means you end up treasuring the slightly older cars, the late 90s, early noughties. It's kind of a peak era for cars. They tend to be pretty good at resisting rust. They're complex, but not overly complex. I think there's a lot to be said for cars of that ilk.
Yeah.
And yeah, there are other factors at play. Obviously, if you've got a family, you might want the latest safety gear. So old Banger's probably not quite so much for you. But generally, I think that is the golden era of motoring in some ways. Everyone has their own thoughts on when the golden era of motoring was. Some people still can't be doing with fuel injection at all.
No. I mean, there's a lot of people who would say it was more simplistic, 60s, 70s and whatnot, than 80s, 90s. But was there that profound a shift?
Oh, it's a tricky one, isn't it? I think in some ways there was. I think moving to breakerless ignition, which happened in the 1980s for the most part, where you no longer have contact points and condensers, which go wrong all the time. I think that was a big improvement for cars. But I do think fuel injection brought economy to cars that previously wouldn't have had it. So a Renault 21 Monaco I used to have, that had fuel injection, would do 35 to the gallon with a 2-litre engine in just the way a Land Crab won't. You won't get 35 mpg out of a Land Crab. Very thirsty old beasts. So yeah, that's why I tend to favour some complexity, but not too much.
Yeah, no, that's understandable. But yeah, it would be, I think we need to maybe look at this and look at London as an area for possibly there being a bit more of a vein of these cars.
Yeah, but not for long, because people will get rid of them. So I think this year is kind of last chance saloon. I mean, ultimately, ULEZ is why we have Miss Daisy the Daihatsu. Yeah. She escaped before ULEZ came in. Yeah, she was right on the border of the existing area and would have been swept up into the new area.
Yeah. Thinking about our local marketplace and whatnot for cars and whatnot. It's not the bangers anymore. You've got a lot of classics on there. There's a lot of classics for sale at the moment.
Yeah, a lot of classics.
And also things that people have blatantly dragged out of a hedge and are asking £1,000 for.
Yeah. I mean, I saw this on Going Tree this morning. Like, here's a completely rotten Mazda MX-5. That'll be 500 quid, please. And you're like, no.
I thought, it was a Toyota big SUV, not SUV, of some descript along the Lucida Estima kind of, what's it? And they're like, yeah, it started 7 years ago. Oh, that's nice. That's nice.
Ran when parked. Yeah.
It sat in the field.
Yeah. So there's an awful lot of people asking a lot of money for nothing at all.
It's almost like they've had these cars on their land for a very long time, realise there's no cheap cars around. So they are. I swear to God, they're dragging them out of hedges and stuff.
But there you go. That's kind of our thoughts on Bangernomics. It's going to require a bit of a change on Hubnut. But then, I mean, in truth, I'm so fed up with selling cars. Because selling cheap cars is just a world of pain, especially when you live here, so you're so far away from everywhere. There's limited market for the sort of cars I like to own around here, I'd say. And that makes selling them as a pain in the arse. People tend to prefer to buy something expensive and keep it for years and run it into the ground. Which is why I don't tend to buy cars locally, because they end up like a certain Daihatsu.
Can't imagine what Daihatsu. You mean that Miss Daisy Day?
No. No, a certain blue Daihatsu. That tends to be the issue. People sell them when they've kind of had it.
Yeah.
And sadly, resurrecting such cars is quite expensive.
Yeah, it's quite expensive.
Yeah, in terms of time and parts.
But I think Bangernomics is not dead. I think actually it's having a bit of a resurgence through the fact of necessity.
Perhaps, but yeah, my problem with it is the market is just diminishing.
The market is definitely diminishing.
The cars that work for Bangernomics aren't available so much anymore.
I don't feel we can make an educated conclusion.
You won't find education on this channel.
Where we've not looked at London.
No, but...
And Birmingham's got a similar scheme.
Birmingham's got a low emission zone as well.
And Bristol. It would be interesting to look and see what their markets are like. I suspect it may well be the same. I think a lot of these cars are just going to scrap just through people being worried and thinking this is coming, I've got to do this now.
Yeah.
I think that's how I would feel in that situation. But I do think, I mean, one of our neighbours, they have a car that is probably on the lower end of value
I'd say
wise.
that's sub-grand.
Yeah. And because it's their family vehicle, they put just under £1,000 into it recently because they need a car. They need that car.
I suspect a bit more over Christmas. The exhaust sounds much happier now.
Flipping car.
Yeah.
I felt very sorry for them at that point in time.
Because French, perhaps. Oh, you spent some money on me? Please spend more money on me. Yes, we know the feeling well.
Not enough.
Yeah.
It's like when you go under Chevy and you've got all that rust and then there's the new exhaust.
Very strange. But yeah, I think that's the main takeaway, is grab something while you can, because this glory period of Bangernomics may be coming to an end, may not, but yeah, certainly if you got something good, hold on to it.
Has anybody set up a business of just being like Ules survivors?
Oh, if I had a warehouse, I would just.
Why is nobody doing this?
Because there's no money in it, probably.
I think there is a little bit of money because people will just want rid. They'll want scrap value.
And just put Festival of the Unexceptional. Here's the car for you.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah.
Throw in like an 80s jacket or something. You'd be away.
This is a great business. We shouldn't tell the world. This is our idea.
No.
Yeah.
But I do think that, for the sake of the cars, but also that is a tidy little business I think you can have there.
There we go. Please don't steal our idea.
We can't do it.
We haven't got a warehouse.
We're in deepest West Wales.
Yeah, you need to be a bit
Keep
closer to
going
London,
back and forth to get them.
Get sick of the M4. So yeah, I would welcome your thoughts on the matter as well. I mean, obviously we're not going to stop what we're doing here, but already last year, a lot less, fewer? So much fewer? I'm struggling with the grammar. I didn't buy many cars last year. In fact, I only bought one car.
Well,
I was given a car, and we acquired a trailer tent.
What?
Folding camper.
Thank you.
So
we acquired it, did we?
Yeah. So already there's been a bit of a shift, but I'm still loving my cars. I'm loving the cars I've got at the moment, despite the little blue one fighting me. And
let's be honest, we were not in the best mindset yesterday. And
no, we had a grump yesterday.
Little blue car is actually there or thereabouts.
Yeah.
So we should be celebrating it with.
We got the bonnet back on. We weren't very happy, but we will celebrate getting it an MOT when we can.
Absolutely, because that's going to be interesting. Because the first time we give it a proper drive, it's going to be to the MOT.
Yeah, it's going to be fun times. So that's some future content you can look forward to. We've got the Berlingo is in for MOT tomorrow. Yep. So we've got that to look forward to, hopefully, and then trying to work out why it's not running 100% right.
You still
should get some parts next week.
Did you swap the MAF sensor?
Yeah, the MAF was swapped, which has made it feel a little more lively, but there's still that miss, which I think is air getting into the fuel filter. So I've got a new fuel filter housing on the way. I've now got a new spanner. I'm going to show you my spanner. I'm very excited about it. It's a lovely colour.
By the way, look at the glory, folks.
Yeah, we have a shelf. In fact, I should show off some of the items. These have been in a previous mailbox. Someone made these, handmade.
They're beautiful. They're made out of paper and cardboard. They're absolutely stunning.
They're amazing.
Hang on.
Incredible level to detail. Kelvin Hendry and Sarah Mackay. So yeah, beautiful, beautiful models. We're glad to finally have these on display here. And then we've got this, which I also love. This is part of an American school bus. Aging Wheels is doing his bus conversion, and he's engraved these little glass plaques and made a little wood thing himself, which is very, very nice. Was that Christmas last year or my birthday?
That was last year Christmas.
Yeah, Miss Hubnut bought me a GSA dashboard. I've got my chocolate DS. We've got the model Took. And then we've got Lego of the children variously, Bonsai, and Optimus Prime.
Optimus is cool. He transforms.
Yeah, he built that in no time at all.
He does with any Lego.
Yeah, so that's some of the things we've got on display here.
And it's like chaos. We
don't talk about chaos. Ignore the chaos. But yeah, there's my fantastic tool. Look at the colour. Lovely metallic blue. So hopefully that will help me get the fuel filter housing back together, but I am going to replace the filter housing because I think that's where the air is getting in. So that's part of the joy of Bangernomics, is keeping the things going. So look forward to more content on that, and yeah, we look forward to seeing you in a future video. Farewell.
Obsessed.
I love my sockets.